Hello and welcome to Mystery Tales, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today, we delve into a chilling Victorian mystery from the chronicles of Dr. John Watson. Settle in, dear listeners, as I narrate this tale of intrigue and deduction in the fog-shrouded streets of London. Chapter 1: The Arrival of Miss Vance. It was a bleak autumn evening in the year 1892, when the winds of London howled through the labyrinthine streets, carrying with them the acrid tang of coal smoke and the damp breath of the Thames. The city lay cloaked in a fog so dense it seemed to smother the very gas lamps that flickered valiantly against the encroaching gloom. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had just returned to our lodgings at 221B Baker Street, my coat heavy with the drizzle of an East End errand. My day had been consumed by the care of a young dock worker, whose fever had necessitated a delicate intervention, a task that left me weary, but satisfied with the prospect of his recovery. The warmth of the sitting room with its crackling fire and familiar clutter was a welcome reprieve from the chill without. Sherlock Holmes, my friend and companion, reclined in his armchair by the hearth, his long, lean frame draped in a crimson dressing gown. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, were fixed upon the ceiling, where shadows danced in the flickering light. His fingers, steepled beneath his chin, betrayed the restless workings of his mind, as though he were unraveling some invisible knot in the ether. A pipe, unlit but clenched between his teeth, completed the picture of a man lost in contemplation. "Ah, Watson," he remarked without turning, his voice low and precise. "You bring with you the unmistakable scent of the docks. A case of typhoid, perhaps? No. Wait. The faint trace of carbolic acid suggests a surgical procedure. A minor operation, I presume, performed under less than ideal conditions. How fares the patient?" I chuckled, shaking the rain from my hat and hanging my coat upon the rack. As ever, latest parliamentary squabbles. The door opened to reveal a woman of perhaps 25, her countenance pale as alabaster, and her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resolve. She was clad in a gown of mourning black, its severe lines softened only by the delicate lace at her throat. A veil, pinned to a modest bonnet, partially obscured her features, lending her an air of mystery that seemed to thicken the very atmosphere of the room. In her gloved hands she clutched a small envelope, its edges frayed and discolored with what appeared, at first glance, to be smears of dried blood. The sight sent an involuntary shiver down my spine, though I endeavored to maintain the professional composure befitting a medical man. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" she inquired, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a gale. "And Dr. Watson?" "I am Miss Eleanor Vance. I have heard of your extraordinary talents, Mr. Holmes, and I come to you in a matter of grave import. This letter." She held it forth, her hands shaking so violently that I feared she might drop it. "It arrived this morning, postmarked from London, and it is stained with blood. Worse, it bears the handwriting of my uncle, Sir Reginald Blackwood, who has been dead these 3 years." Holmes' gaze sharpened, his entire being seeming to coil with anticipation. He gestured to the chair opposite his own. Pray, take a seat, Miss Vance. Watson, if you would be so kind as to pour our guest a glass of brandy. The lady is clearly in need of fortification. Now, Miss Vance, compose yourself and tell us everything. From the very beginning. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem. I hastened to the sideboard, pouring a measure of brandy from the decanter and pressing the glass into her trembling hands. She took a tentative sip, her eyes never leaving Holmes, who had already taken the envelope with the care of a jeweler handling a rare gem. He turned. This letter arrived at my lodgings in Bloomsbury. It was delivered by the morning post, with no return address, and its contents. She paused, her eyes brimming with tears. They speak of a family curse, of a hidden fortune that brings death to those who seek it. And the blood. Oh, Mr. Holmes, I fear it is an omen of murder. Holmes, who had been examining the envelope with a pocket lens, now leaned back, his expression inscrutable. A curse, you say? Fascinating. And the handwriting, how certain are you that it matches your uncle's? As certain as I can be, she replied. I have letters from him, written during my childhood. The flourish on the B, the slant of the Y, they are unmistakable. But how can it be? He is gone, and yet this letter speaks as though he were alive, warning me to beware. Holmes held the envelope to the light, his eyes narrowing. The paper is of fine quality, likely imported, a detail we shall explore further. The stains, however, are curious. Watson, your medical opinion, if you please. Blood or something else? I took the envelope, noting the irregular, rust-colored smears. At a glance, it resembles dried blood, I said cautiously, but I would need to examine it more closely. It could be paint or some other pigment designed to alarm. Quite so, Holmes murmured. A simple chemical test will resolve the matter. But first, Miss Vance, let us hear the contents of this letter. Read it aloud if you can bear it. With trembling fingers, she withdrew a single sheet of paper from the envelope. The handwriting was bold yet elegant, marred only by the sinister stains that crept across its surface. She cleared her throat and began. My dearest Eleanor, if this letter reaches you, know that it comes from beyond the veil. A warning etched in the blood of our lineage. The Blackwood fortune, hidden these many years, is cursed. Seek it not, lest you invite ruin upon yourself and all you hold dear. The shadows of our past are restless, and they will not be denied. Heed this, or perish. Your loving uncle, Sir Reginald Blackwood. The room fell silent. Need to visit Blackwood Manor at the earliest opportunity. Miss Vance, you will accompany us, if you are willing. There are questions that only the scene of your uncle's life and death can answer. She nodded, her resolve hardening despite her fear. I will do whatever you require, Mr. Holmes. I cannot rest until this mystery is resolved. Excellent, said Holmes, rising with a sudden energy. Mrs. Hudson, kindly arrange for tea and sandwiches. Our guest must be fortified for the journey ahead. Watson, your revolver may yet prove useful. We depart at dawn. As Miss Vance sipped her brandy, her eyes fixed on the fire, I could not shake the sense that we stood on the threshold of a dark and intricate puzzle. The fog outside seemed to press closer, as if London itself were conspiring to conceal the truth. Yet, with Sherlock Holmes at the helm, I had no doubt that the shadows would soon yield their secrets. Chapter 2. The Examination of the Letter. The fire in the grate of 221B Baker Street cast a warm, flickering glow across the room. but the atmosphere within was charged with a quiet intensity as Sherlock Holmes bent over the blood-stained letter. Miss Eleanor Vance sat rigid in her chair, her gloved hands clasped tightly, her dark eyes following Holmes' every movement with a mixture of hope and dread. I, Dr. John Watson, stood at his side, my notebook open, ready to record the observations that would, I knew, form the foundation of our investigation. The rain continued its relentless patter against the windows, and the distant clatter of hooves on Baker Street mingled with the occasional gust that rattled the panes. Holmes held the letter aloft, turning it slowly in the lamplight, his lean fingers handling it with the precision of a watchmaker. The envelope, frayed at the edges and marred by those sinister crimson smears, seemed to pulse with secrets. He produced a magnifying glass from the cluttered table beside him, its lens catching the firelight as he scrutinized the paper's surface. His expression was one of fierce concentration. His lips pursed, his gray eyes narrowed to slits. "Observe, Watson, say you to these stains." I leaned closer, peering at the irregular, rust-colored marks. They were smeared across the envelope in a manner that suggested deliberate application, yet their edges had the uneven quality of something organic. At first glance, I said cautiously, they certainly resembled dried blood. The color is consistent, as is the way it has soaked into the paper. But I have seen similar effects produced by pigments, red ochre perhaps, or even theatrical makeup. A chemical test would confirm it. "Precisely," said Holmes, reaching for a small vial on the table, one of many in his eclectic collection of reagents. "A simple test for hemoglobin will settle the matter. If this is indeed blood, it will react with benzidine. If not—" He trailed off, his fingers deftly preparing a small sample. With a dropper, he applied a solution to a tiny scraping of the stain, which he had carefully lifted with a pair of tweezers. The paper turned a faint blue, but the reaction was sluggish, lacking the vigor one would expect from human blood. "Curious," Holmes murmured. "Not human, I wager. The reaction suggests animal blood, poultry perhaps, or swine. A crude attempt to inspire terror, but effective in its way. Miss Vance, this letter was crafted to alarm you, but its creator was no butcher. The blood is likely from a fowl, slaughtered for the purpose. A theatrical flourish, nothing more." Miss Vance's shoulders sagged, though whether from relief or renewed confusion I could not tell. "But why, Mr. Holmes? Why go to such lengths to frighten me? And the handwriting, it is my uncle's, I am certain of it." Holmes set the letter down and steepled his fingers, his gaze drifting to the ceiling as though the answer lay in the smoke-stained plaster. "The handwriting is a point of interest. Let us examine it closely." He retrieved the letter and held it beneath the magnifying glass once more, his eyes darting over the elegant, looping script. "The resemblance to your uncle's hand is striking, but there are discrepancies. Paris, and he has never spoken of the estate with anything but generosity." "A red herring, perhaps," Holmes said enigmatically. "Or a mask for deeper motives. We must proceed with caution. Tell me, Miss Vance, did your uncle ever speak of this hidden fortune mentioned in the letter, or of any family curse?" She shook her head, her veil trembling slightly. "Never. My uncle was a practical man, not given to superstition. He spoke often of his business ventures, of shipments from Calcutta and Canton, but never of curses or hidden wealth. The letter's words. They feel foreign, as though written by someone who did not know him well. Holmes' eyes gleamed with satisfaction. A valuable observation. The letter's tone is melodramatic, almost literary, as though its author drew inspiration from Gothic novels rather than personal knowledge. This suggests an outsider, or someone within the household acting under duress. We must visit Blackwood Manor to uncover more. Watson, fetch your medical bag and your revolver. We depart at dawn. Miss Vance, you will accompany us, as your presence may prompt revelations that my questions alone cannot. She straightened, her resolve hardening despite the pallor of her cheeks. I will do whatever is necessary, Mr. Holmes. I cannot live in fear of this phantom. Excellent, said Holmes, rising with a sudden energy that seemed to electrify the room. Mrs. Hudson, kindly prepare a room for Miss Vance. She will remain here tonight for her safety. Watson, let us turn our attention to the envelope's postmark. It was sent from London, you say. The specific post office may yield a clue. I examined the postmark. A smudged but legible stamp indicating the letter had been mailed from a post office in Holborn. Holborn, I said. Not far from Bloomsbury, where Miss Vance resides. Could the sender have been watching her? Possibly, Holmes replied, pacing now, his dressing gown swirling about him like a cape. But Holborn is also a hub for forgers and petty criminals. The choice of post office may be deliberate, or it may be convenience. We storm. I could not help but admire her courage. She had come to us a stranger, bearing a burden of fear, yet she faced it with a quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength. Mr. Holmes, she ventured at last, do you believe this letter is connected to my uncle's death? The carriage accident. It was ruled an accident, but I have always wondered if there was more to it. Holmes paused, his pipette hovering over a beaker. A pertinent question, Miss Vance. The accident may indeed be relevant, though we lack evidence to connect it to this letter. Tell me, was there an inquest? Any suggestion of foul play? There was an inquest, she replied. The coroner concluded it was a tragic mishap. The driver survived, but he was delirious from his injuries and could recall little. The horses, they said, were spooked by lightning. But my uncle was a cautious man. He would not have traveled in such a storm unless it was urgent. Holmes' eyes narrowed. Urgent, you say? That is a thread worth pursuing. We shall examine the records of the inquest when we return from Surrey. For now, rest assured that this letter is but the first piece of a larger puzzle. We shall unravel it, thread by thread. As he spoke, the clock on the mantel struck 10, its chimes a somber reminder of the hour. Mrs. Hudson entered with a tray of tea and sandwiches, her maternal concern evident as she fussed over Miss Vance. You poor dear, she said softly. You'll be safe here tonight. I've made up the spare room. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson, Miss Vance murmured, her voice steadier now. And thank you, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. I feel hopeful for the first time today. Holmes inclined his head, his expression softening for a moment. Hope is a fine starting point, Miss Vance. Tomorrow, we shall seek truth. Watson, ensure your revolver is loaded. I suspect this case may lead us into darker corners than we anticipate. As Miss Vance retired to her room, I watched Holmes return to his workbench, his silhouette sharp, joined him in the sitting room. His lean frame clad in a dark frock coat, his eyes bright with anticipation. Miss Vance, pale but resolute, awaited us, her mourning attire lending her an air of solemn determination. Mrs. Hudson, ever the nurturing presence, pressed a basket of provisions upon us, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do take care, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said. "And you, Miss Vance, mind you don't overtax yourself." "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson," Miss Vance replied, managing a faint smile. "Your kindness is a comfort." Holmes, impatient to be off, ushered us into a waiting hansom cab, its driver muffled against the chill. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones echoed through the misty streets as we made our way to Waterloo Station, where a train bound for Surrey awaited. The platform was a bustle of top hats and umbrellas, the air thick with steam and the sharp scent of coal. Holmes secured a private compartment, and as the train lurched into motion, we settled into an uneasy silence, the rhythmic clack of the wheels underscoring our thoughts. From fields and hedgerows blurring past, fog clinging to ancient oaks. The journey to Surrey was a study in contrasts. The urban clamor of London gave way to rolling hills and quiet hamlets. Yet the fog seemed to follow us, curling around the train like ghostly fingers. Miss Vance stared out the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Holmes pored over a map of the Blackwood estate, his pencil marking points of interest with surgical precision. "Blackwood Manor," he mused, "built in the reign of Charles II, if my memory serves. Gothic in style, with extensive grounds and a private chapel. The family crypt, Miss Vance. Does it still stand?" She nodded, her voice low. "Yes, beneath the chapel. It has not been opened since my uncle's burial, though I recall him speaking of its history. He said it held secrets, but I thought he meant only family lore." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Secrets indeed. We shall inspect this crypt among other things. The manor itself may hold clues, weathered gargoyles." As we descended, the door swung open to reveal Harold Blackwood, Miss Vance's cousin and heir to the estate. He was a portly man in his late 30s, with a florid complexion and a nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. His eyes widened at the sight of us, though he quickly masked his surprise with a forced smile. "Cousin Eleanor," he exclaimed, stepping forward to take her hand. "This is unexpected. And these gentlemen, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume, and Dr. Watson? Your reputation precedes you, sir. To what do I owe this visit?" Miss Vance hesitated, glancing at Holmes, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Harold," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. "I received a letter yesterday, written in my uncle's hand, stained with blood. It speaks of a curse and a hidden fortune. I have engaged Mr. Holmes to investigate." Harold's face paled, his twitch becoming more pronounced. "A letter in Uncle Reginald's hand? But that's impossible. He's been dead these 3 years. Surely it's some cruel jest." "Perhaps," said Holmes, his tone mild but his eyes sharp as a blade. "We shall determine that in due course. May we enter, Mr. Blackwood? I should like to see the manor and speak with your household." Of course," Harold stammered, leading us into a grand hall adorned with faded tapestries and a massive chandelier, its crystals dulled by dust. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and the dim light filtering through tall, narrow windows cast long shadows across the floor. Flickering candlelight, portraits with stern faces, a creaking chandelier swaying faintly. Holmes' gaze swept the room, missing nothing. He paused before a portrait of Sir Reginald Blackwood, a stern-faced man with piercing eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. The painting hung slightly askew, a detail that seemed to intrigue Holmes. "A fine likeness," he remarked. "Recently moved, I see." The dust on the wall shows a faint outline where it once hung. Harold flushed. "Oh, need to trouble you." Holmes' lips twitched, but he said nothing, instead turning his attention to a locked desk in the corner of the room. Its mahogany surface was polished to a high sheen, but a faint scratch near the lock caught his eye. "A curious piece," he said. "Your uncle's, I presume?" "Yes," Harold said, his tone guarded. "His private desk. I've not had cause to open it." Holmes' fingers lingered on the scratch, but he did not press the matter. Instead, he turned to Miss Vance. "Tell me, have you visited the manor since your uncle's death? Are there places he favored? Rooms, gardens, the chapel, perhaps?" "The chapel," she said thoughtfully. "He often went there to reflect. He said it was a place of peace, though I found it rather grim." "Then we shall begin there," Holmes declared. "But first, a tour of the grounds, if you please, Mr. Blackwood." Harold led us through the manor's sprawling gardens, where rose bushes tangled with thorns and a neglected fountain stood silent, its basin filled with stagnant water. The stables, too, were in disrepair, their doors creaking on rusted hinges. Holmes' eyes darted everywhere, noting a broken twig here, a scuffed path there. At one point, he knelt to examine a patch of earth near the stables, his fingers sifting through the dirt. "Fresh hoofprints," he murmured. "A horse was here within the last day, though the stables appear unused. Curious." Harold coughed. "A neighbor, perhaps, riding through. The grounds are open to the village." Holmes' silence was more eloquent than words. As we returned to the manor, the fog thickened, and a distant howl pierced the air. A dog, perhaps, or something wilder. Miss Vance shivered, and I placed a reassuring hand on her arm. Exterior shot, fog rolling over the manor grounds, stables in disrepair, a shadowy figure glimpsed briefly in the mist. Dinner was a tense affair, served in a dining room lit by flickering candles. The butler, Grimes, an elderly man with a stooped posture and shifty eyes, moved silently, his presence almost against the windows like a living thing. I checked my revolver, its weight a cold comfort. Holmes, undeterred, lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a question mark. Blackwood Manor held its secrets tightly, but I knew my friend would prise them loose, one by one. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Fog. The morning following our arrival at Blackwood Manor broke with a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of the ancient house. The fog, which had clung to the Surrey countryside like a spectral shroud, followed us back to London, wrapping the city in a damp, gray embrace. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of the previous day's discoveries. The blood-stained letter, the nervous demeanor of Harold Blackwood, the subtle clues Sherlock Holmes had gleaned from the manor's dusty corners. Our return to the capital was prompted by Holmes' insistence on pursuing a lead in Whitechapel, where whispers of a black market dealer in forged documents had reached his ears. Miss Eleanor Vance, though weary, agreed to accompany us, her resolve unshaken despite the growing mystery. We departed Blackwood Manor at first light, the carriage rattling along the rutted roads to the village station. Holmes was silent, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon as if the fog itself might yield answers. Miss Vance clutched her reticule, the blood-stained letter safely tucked within, her face pale but determined. The train journey back to London was uneventful, save for the oppressive atmosphere of the fog, which seemed to press against the carriage windows, blurring the world beyond into a dreamlike haze. Interior shot of Holmes, Watson, and Miss Vance in a dimly lit compartment. Tension palpable. Upon arriving at Waterloo Station, Holmes led us directly to a hansom cab, his instructions to the driver clipped and precise. "To Whitechapel," he said, "and make haste." The cab lurched forward, its wheels clattering over cobblestones as we plunged into the heart of London's underbelly. The streets grew narrower, the air thick with the mingled scents of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, and the faint tang of the Thames. Gas lamps flickered feebly, their expertise here. The Black Anchor was a squat, grimy establishment, its windows clouded with grease, and its sign creaking in the damp breeze. As we entered, the stench of stale ale and tobacco enveloped us, and the low hum of conversation fell silent. Rough-hewn men and women eyed us warily, their hands tightening on tankards or slipping toward concealed blades. Holmes, undeterred, strode to the bar, where a burly publican with a scarred face polished a glass with exaggerated care. "Good day," Holmes said, his tone deceptively genial. "I seek a man known to deal in specialty documents, a tall fellow with a scar across his cheek. I'm told he frequents this establishment." The publican's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a wiry figure in a tattered cloak slipped from a corner table and darted for the door. Holmes' reflexes were lightning fast. He seized the man's arm, spinning him around to reveal a gaunt face marked by a jagged scar. "Not so fast, my friend," Holmes said, his grip unyielding. "A word, if you please." Visual. Tavern interior. Smoky air. Flickering oil lamps, Holmes confronting the scarred man. Tense onlookers in the background. The man, who gave his name as Jem Crow, was no stranger to coercion. A sovereign from Holmes' pocket loosened his tongue, and we retreated to a shadowed booth, Miss Vance keeping a cautious distance. Crow's voice was a low rasp, his eyes darting nervously. I know of inks, old ones, rare ones. A gent came to me, maybe a week ago, asking for India black, the kind used in ledgers 30 years past. Paid well, he did, and asked no questions. "Describe this gentleman," Holmes said, leaning forward. "Portly, twitchy-like, with a fancy waistcoat. Said his name was Blackwood. Wanted the ink for a family matter, he said. Didn't trust him. But gold's gold." Miss Vance gasped softly, her hand rising to her mouth. "Harold," she whispered. "It must be him." Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Indeed. And did this Blackwood mention a letter?" The first assailant lunged, his cudgel swinging toward Holmes. But my friend sidestepped with the agility of a fencer, striking the man's wrist with a sharp crack. The cudgel clattered to the ground, and the attacker howled, clutching his arm. Foggy alley, shadowy figures attacking. Holmes dodging with precision. Watson aiming revolver. Slow-motion cudgel falling. I fired a warning shot into the air, the report echoing like thunder. The second assailant hesitated, but the third charged, aiming for me. My medical training had included some boxing in my army days, and I landed a solid blow to his jaw, sending him sprawling. Holmes dispatched the second with a swift jab of his stick to the man's knee, and the trio fled into the fog, their curses fading into the distance. Miss Vance, trembling but unharmed, clung to my arm. "Are you hurt, Dr. Watson?" she asked, her voice shaking. Not a scratch, I assured her, though my heart pounded. Holmes, unruffled, knelt to retrieve a handkerchief dropped by one of the attackers. It was monogrammed with the initials H.B., Harold Blackwood. A careless oversight, Holmes said, pocketing the handkerchief. Or a deliberate taunt. Either way, it confirms our suspicions. Harold is entangled in this affair, and these ruffians were likely sent to dissuade us. But why attack us? Miss Vance asked, her eyes wide. What do they fear we'll find? The truth, Holmes replied simply. Come, we must return to Baker Street. The fog conceals too many dangers tonight. We hailed another cab, the driver eyeing us warily as we climbed aboard, no doubt noting my revolver and Holmes' grim expression. The journey back to 221B was tense, the fog pressing so close it seemed to seep into the cab itself. Miss Vance sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly, while Holmes stared out the window, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. Gas lamps glowing faintly. Interior shot of Holmes' intense gaze, Miss Vance's anxious expression. Sipping her tea, spoke up. What of the fortune mentioned in the letter? Could it be real? My uncle was wealthy, but he never spoke of hidden wealth. Holmes paused, his pipe now lit, its smoke curling upward. The fortune may be a lure, a fabrication to manipulate you, or it may exist, hidden in the manor or its grounds. The crypt, I suspect, holds answers. Tomorrow we return to Surrey, but tonight we rest. Watson, keep your revolver close. I fear our adversaries are not yet done with us. As Miss Vance retired to the spare room, I checked the locks on the doors and windows. The fog outside a constant reminder of the dangers lurking beyond. Holmes sat by the fire, his eyes fixed on the handkerchief, his mind weaving connections I could only glimpse. The attack in Whitechapel had confirmed one thing. We were closing in on the truth, and someone was desperate to stop us. Firelight flickering, Holmes studying the handkerchief, fog pressing against the windows, a distant howl in the night. The shadows of the fog seemed to mirror the mystery itself, elusive, shifting, and fraught with peril. Yet with Holmes leading the way, I knew we would pierce the veil, no matter how dark the path. Chapter 5. The Suspicious Servant. The dawn that greeted us upon our return to Blackwood Manor was as somber as the one we had left behind in London, with a mist that clung to the Surrey hills like a mourner's veil. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of our nocturnal adventure in Whitechapel, the scuffle in the fog, the monogrammed handkerchief bearing Harold Blackwood's initials, and the whispered hints of a scarred forger, pressing upon my mind. Sherlock Holmes, however, was invigorated, his sharp eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase as we alighted from the carriage at the manor's gates. Miss Eleanor Vance, though pale from the ordeal, maintained her quiet resolve, her mourning attire a stark contrast to the vibrant determination in her gaze. The manor loomed before us, its Gothic spires piercing the low clouds, the ivy-covered walls exuding an air of secrets long buried. The events of the previous night had only deepened the mystery of the blood-stained letter, and Holmes was resolute in his plan to interrogate the household, particularly the butler, Grimes, whose trembling hands and furtive glances at dinner had not escaped his notice. As we entered the grand hall, the chill of the stone floor seeped through my boots, and the faint creak of the chandelier overhead seemed to echo the manor's unease. Heavy oak door swinging open, fog curling around gargoyle statues, dim hall with flickering candlelight. Harold Blackwood greeted us with a forced smile, his nervous twitch more pronounced than ever. "Back so soon, Mr. Holmes. Eleanor, you look exhausted. I trust your journey was uneventful." "Far from it," Holmes replied, his tone mild but his eyes piercing. "We encountered some resistance in London, Mr. Blackwood. A handkerchief bearing your initials was left behind by one of our assailants. Care to explain?" Harold's face drained of color, his hands fumbling with his waistcoat. "My initials? Surely a coincidence, sir. I've lost many handkerchiefs. Servants are careless." Penned in Sir Reginald's hand. Grime's eyes widened and he took an involuntary step back, his hands twisting together. I know nothing of it, sir. I'm but a servant, tending to the house. Letters and such are not my concern." Holmes stepped closer, his gaze unrelenting. "Yet your cuffs tell a different story. Ink stains, Grimes. Black ink, of the sort used in the letter. And your route to the village post office is a daily one, is it not? The letter was mailed from Holborn, but it could have been sent from here, entrusted to you for delivery." The butler's composure cracked, his shoulders sagging. "Please, Mr. Holmes, I meant no harm. Master Harold, he asked me to post a letter, said it was a family matter. I didn't know what was in it, I swear." Miss Vance gasped, her hand rising to her mouth. "Harold, you sent the letter on his orders?" Grimes nodded miserably. "Aye, miss. He gave it to me sealed, said it was a jest, a way to settle an old debt. The stains, he said they were paint to give it a frightful look. I didn't ask questions. Master Harold's been good to me, kept me on after Sir Reginald's death." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Paint, you say? Or was it blood, as Miss Vance feared? Speak plainly, Grimes, or I shall have you questioned by the constabulary." The butler's voice dropped to a whisper. "It was paint, sir. Red paint, from the old stables. Master Harold mixed it himself. I saw him do it, in the shed by the garden. But I swear I didn't know it would cause such distress." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable but his mind clearly racing. "And what of this jest? Did Harold mention its purpose, or any talk of a hidden fortune?" Grimes shook his head vigorously. "No, sir, nothing like that. Just said it was to settle things with Miss Eleanor. I thought it was a family matter, nothing more." Holmes turned to Harold, who had been hovering near the door, his face a mask of unease. "Mr. Blackwood, your butler's confessed stables." The air outside was damp and heavy, the fog swirling around the neglected outbuildings like a living thing. The shed Grimes had mentioned was a small, ramshackle structure, its door half off its hinges. Inside, we found a cluttered workbench littered with tools, jars of paint, and a small vial of red pigment, its lid askew. Dusty interior, paint cans and brushes scattered, Holmes inspecting a vial of red paint under lantern light. Holmes examined the vial, sniffing its contents. Red ochre, mixed with linseed oil, consistent with Grimes' story. "But look here, Watson." He pointed to a corner of the shed, where a wooden box lay partially hidden beneath a tarp. He lifted the tarp to reveal a carved chest, its lock broken, its contents spilling onto the dirt floor. a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, and a small, glittering object, a ruby pendant, its chain tarnished but intact. "Sir Reginald's correspondence," Holmes said, sifting through the letters. "And this pendant, likely a family heirloom. The letters speak of his trade ventures, but one mentions a safeguard hidden in the manor. Could this be the fortune alluded to in the letter?" I scanned the documents, noting Sir Reginald's meticulous handwriting. "These are from his importing days," I said. "He mentions opium shipments, highly lucrative but risky. Could he have hidden profits somewhere on the estate?" Holmes nodded, his eyes alight. "A plausible theory, Watson. The letters talk of a hidden fortune may not be fiction after all. But why would Harold go to such lengths to scare Miss Vance away? Does he know of this treasure, or is he merely protecting his own interests?" As we returned to the manor, a sudden noise, a sharp crack like a branch snapping, drew our attention to the garden. Holmes' hand went to his walking stick, and I gripped my revolver. But the fog revealed nothing but shadows. "We are being watched," Holmes murmured. "This affair grows more complex by the hour." Back in the parlor, Miss Vance confronted Harold, her voice steady despite her anger. "You lied to me, Harold." Truths. Miss Vance, though shaken, retired to her room with a renewed sense of purpose. I checked my revolver, its weight a reassurance against the unseen threats lurking in the fog. Holmes, as ever, was undaunted, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the air as he sat by the fire, piecing together the puzzle. Manor interior, Holmes by the fire, pipe smoke rising, fog pressing against the windows, a distant creak echoing. The discovery in the shed had confirmed one thing. The blood-stained letter was no mere prank but part of a deeper scheme. Harold's confession, Grimus' complicity, and the ruby pendant pointed to a truth buried in the heart of Blackwood Manor. Yet the shadows in the fog hinted at a danger still lurking, waiting to strike. Chapter 6. Hidden Alliances. The morning air at Blackwood Manor carried a damp chill, as if the fog that enveloped the Surrey estate had seeped into the very walls. I, Dr. John Watson, awoke with a sense of unease. The events of the previous day, the butler Grimus' confession, the discovery of the ruby pendant, and Harold Blackwood's faltering excuses swirling in my mind. Sherlock Holmes, however, was already up, his lean figure silhouetted against the window as he studied the misty grounds, his pipe sending tendrils of smoke curling upward like unanswered questions. Miss Eleanor Vance joined us in the dining room, her face pale but resolute, her morning gown a stark reminder of the mystery that had drawn us here. Holmes' plan for the day was clear. We would return to London to pursue the lead provided by Jem Crow, the Whitechapel informant who had spoken of a scarred man accompanying Harold. The handkerchief marked HB, the attack in the fog, and now Grimus' admission that the blood-stained letter was a ruse painted with red ochre, all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a mere family jest. As we prepared to depart, Harold lingered in the hall, his nervous twitch betraying his anxiety. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice strained, "I beg you, believe me, I meant no harm to Eleanor. That handkerchief, it was stolen, I swear." Tightly asked, "Do you believe Harold is truly in debt as he claims, or is this fortune real?" Holmes' lips twitched. "Debt is a powerful motivator, Miss Vance, but greed is stronger. The ruby pendant we found suggests your uncle concealed wealth, perhaps from his opium trade. Harold may know of it, or he may be a pawn in a larger game. We shall see." Arriving at Waterloo Station, we plunged once more into London's foggy maze, the air thick with coal smoke and the cries of street vendors. Holmes led us to Spitalfields, a district where the line between commerce and crime blurred. His network of irregulars, those sharp-eyed urchins who scoured the city for him, had been dispatched to track the scarred man. We met one, a wiry lad named Wiggins, in a narrow alley near a costermonger's stall. Visual: Spitalfields Alley, bustling market, fog swirling, Wiggins emerging from shadows with a cheeky grin. "Got your man, Mr. Holmes," Wiggins said, tipping his cap. Tall cove, scar on his left cheek, walks with a limp. Seen him at the Red Lion, a tavern by the docks. He's there most nights, meetin' a gent who sounds like you're Mr. Blackwood. Holmes slipped Wiggins a shilling. "Well done, lad. Keep watch and report any movement." Turning to us, he said, "The Red Lion it is. Watson, your revolver may be needed. Miss Vance, stay close." The Red Lion was a squalid den, its air thick with the stench of gin and tobacco. Gas lamps cast a sickly glow over rough-hewn tables, where dock workers and rogues hunched over their drinks. Holmes, with his uncanny ability to blend into any setting, adopted a slouch and a coarse accent, posing as a sailor seeking a deal. I kept my hand near my revolver while Miss Vance, her veil lowered, drew curious glances but no questions. Visual: tavern interior. Smoky haze, tankards clinking, Holmes in disguise whispering to a barmaid. A barmaid, her apron stained, pointed us to a back room where the scarred cove was said to hold court. Estate, if she thought it was cursed. Paid me in gold and an old ruby trinket. I used paint, not blood. Thought it would be enough to spook her. Miss Vance's voice trembled with anger. "You terrorized me, sir! Why would Harold do such a thing?" Marwood shrugged, his eyes hard. "Debts, miss. He owes a syndicate, nasty lot, down by the docks. They'll break his knees if he don't pay. That fortune he mentioned, he thinks it's real, hidden somewhere in that manor. Wanted you gone so he could search without you claimin' half." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "And the attack in Whitechapel? Your doing?" "Not me," Marwood said, raising his hands. "The syndicate, likely. They don't like snoopers." "Blackwood's handkerchief? I nicked it from him. Thought it would be useful to shift blame." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his mind clearly racing. "A syndicate, you say? Names, Marwood." The forger hesitated, then muttered, "The Crimson Hand. Run by a man called Varkas. You don't cross 'em, not if you value your neck." Holmes nodded, filing the information away. "You'll remain in London, Marwood, and you'll speak to no one of this. If I find you've warned your employers, you'll regret it." As we left the tavern, the fog seemed to close in, muffling the clatter of the docks. Miss Vance was shaken, her hands trembling. A syndicate? Harold involved with such people? It's unthinkable. "Not unthinkable," Holmes said. "Desperation drives men to dark alliances. The Crimson Hand explains the attack in Whitechapel. They protect their interests with violence. But the fortune, that intrigues me. The ruby pendant suggests Sir Reginald hid something of value. We must return to the manor and search the crypt." Before we could hail a cab, a boy darted from the fog, thrusting a crumpled newspaper clipping into Holmes' hand. It was from the Evening Standard, dated 3 days prior, describing a murder in Whitechapel. A man found drained of blood, his body arranged in a ritualistic pose. Syndicate, aware of our interference, sends ruffians to dissuade us. But the fortune, opium profits perhaps, or something more tangible, remains the heart of this mystery. I frowned, my medical mind grappling with the clipping. This murder, drained of blood, it's too specific to be unrelated, Holmes. Could the syndicate be using it to amplify the cursed narrative? Precisely, Holmes said, lighting his pipe. A clever misdirection, but it raises questions. Is the murder truly their work, or are we dealing with another player? Tomorrow we return to Blackwood Manor. The crypt holds answers, I am certain. Miss Vance, her voice steady despite her fear, asked, "What if Harold is lying about his debts? What if he's after this fortune for himself?" Holmes' eyes gleamed. A valid suspicion. Harold's story is plausible, but his actions betray calculation. The crypt will tell us more. Watson, ensure your medical bag is stocked. Violence may yet find us. As we retired, the fog outside seemed to thicken, its tendrils creeping beneath the door. I checked my revolver, its weight a cold comfort. Holmes sat by the fire, the newspaper clipping in hand, his mind weaving connections through the shadows. The crimson hand, the scarred forger, the hidden fortune. All were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and I knew Holmes would not rest until it was unraveled. Baker firelight flickering, Holmes studying the clipping. Fog pressing against the windows, a distant ship's horn sounding. The alliance between Harold and the syndicate had cast a new light on the blood-stained letter, but the murder clipping hinted at a darker force at play. As we prepared to return to the manor, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching from the fog, waiting for our next move. Chapter 7. The Forgotten Crypt. The morning air at Blackwood Manor was thick with the damp chill of autumn. The fog that had pursued us from London settling over the Surrey estate like a shroud. Crypt today. I trust you have no objections. Harold's eyes darted to Miss Vance, then back to Holmes. None at all, Mr. Holmes. The crypt is old and seldom visited, but you're welcome to it. I've no secrets there. Holmes' lips twitched, a silent acknowledgement of the lie. We shall see. Miss Vance, Watson, let us proceed. The chapel stood at the edge of the manor's grounds, a squat stone structure with stained glass windows dulled by time and neglect. Its iron-bound door creaked as we entered, the air within heavy with the scent of mildew and ancient wax. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the windows, which depicted somber saints gazing down with judgmental eyes. A spiral staircase in the corner led to the crypt below, its steps worn smooth by centuries of Blackwood feet. Chapel interior, dusty pews, flickering candlelight, stained glass casting muted colors, spiral staircase descending into darkness. Holmes lit a lantern, its flame casting eerie shadows as we descended. The air grew colder, the walls damp with condensation. Miss Vance clutched her shawl, her breath visible in the chill. My uncle came here often, she said softly. He said it was a place of reflection, but I always found it oppressive. Reflection often cloaks secrets, Holmes replied, his voice echoing in the narrow passage. Your uncle's letter spoke of a hidden fortune. If it exists, the crypt is a likely repository. The crypt was a vaulted chamber, its walls lined with stone alcoves containing the remains of Blackwood ancestors. Marble plaques bore names and dates stretching back to the 17th century, their inscriptions barely legible in the lantern's glow. At the center stood Sir Reginald Blackwood's tomb, a massive sarcophagus carved with intricate vines and heraldic symbols. Holmes knelt beside it, his fingers tracing the edges, his eyes searching for anomalies. "Observe, Watson," he said, pointing to a faint scratch on the sarcophagus lid. "Recent and deliberate. Someone has tampered with this tomb." I leaned closer, noting the irregularity in the stone. "Could it be grave robbers?" I asked, my medical mind hidden, safe from prying eyes. But they carry a curse of greed. Seek them only with pure intent. Miss Vance's eyes widened. "The fortune, it's real. But what does he mean by a curse?" Holmes' expression was grim. "Your uncle likely refers to the moral peril of his opium trade. These profits, ill-gotten perhaps, were hidden to evade taxes or creditors. The map points to the oak grove, but we must proceed with caution." As he spoke, a faint scuffle echoed from the staircase. I drew my revolver, my heart pounding, while Holmes raised the lantern, its light revealing fresh footprints in the dust. Too large for Grimes, too deliberate for a casual visitor. "We are not alone," Holmes whispered. "Stay close, Watson." We moved toward the staircase, the air thick with tension. A shadow flickered at the edge of the light, and a figure lunged from the darkness, wielding a heavy iron candlestick. I fired a warning shot, the report deafening in the confined space, and the figure stumbled, dropping the candlestick with a clang. Holmes pounced, pinning the assailant to the ground. A young stable hand, his face pale with fear. Shadowy figure attacking, revolver flash. Holmes wrestling the stable hand. Dust swirling in lantern light. "Who sent you?" Holmes demanded, his grip unyielding. "Speak or you'll face worse than a night in jail." The lad, barely 20, stammered. "Nobody, sir. I saw you come down here, thought you were thieves. Master Harold told us to watch the crypt, said it's sacred." Holmes released him, his eyes narrowing. "Harold's orders, you say? And what did he fear we'd find?" The stable hand shook his head, trembling. "Didn't say, sir. Just told us to keep strangers out. Please, I meant no harm." Holmes dismissed him with a wave, but his expression was troubled. "Harold's secrecy grows more suspicious. Watson, note the footprints. They match those near the stables. Someone has been here recently, and not for prayer." Miss Vance, clutching the map, said smoothly. "A stable hand mistook us for intruders. Your orders to guard the crypt, Mr. Blackwood, were perhaps overly zealous. Harold's twitch betrayed him. The crypt is sacred to our family. I only meant to protect it." "From what?" Holmes pressed, producing the map. "From this, perhaps. A map to your uncle's hidden fortune, concealed in his tomb. Care to explain why you've been so keen to keep us away?" Harold's eyes widened, his hands trembling. I didn't know about any map. The crypt's been untouched since Uncle's burial. You must believe me." Holmes' gaze was unrelenting. "Your lies are unraveling, Mr. Blackwood. The letter, the attack in Whitechapel, now this. You're in league with dangerous men, and your desperation betrays you." Miss Vance stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "Harold, If you know anything about this fortune, tell us. I'm your cousin. We're family. Why hide the truth? Harold's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. I'm in over my head, Eleanor. The Crimson Hand. They own me. I owe them thousands from bad investments after Uncle's death. I heard rumors of his hidden wealth, thought it could save me. The letter was to scare you off so I could search alone. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. And the stable hand? The syndicate's work, or yours? Not mine, Harold insisted. The Crimson Hand. They've been watching the manor. They must have sent him. Holmes turned to me. Watson, we must search the oak grove tomorrow. The fortune is real, and the syndicate knows it. Miss Vance, remain vigilant. This affair grows more dangerous by the hour. As we retired, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, its walls whispering of betrayal and greed. I checked my revolver, its weight a constant reassurance. Holmes sat by the fire, the map spread before him, his mind weaving connections through the fog. The crypt had yielded a vital clue, but the attack had confirmed a darker truth. The Crimson Hand. Holmes, however, was a beacon of focus, his sharp eyes studying the map, as if it held the key to every secret in the Blackwood lineage. Miss Eleanor Vance, though shaken by her cousin Harold's confession of his debts to the Crimson Hand Syndicate, maintained her resolve, her dark eyes fixed on Holmes with unwavering trust. Harold Blackwood, his nervous twitch now a constant tick, hovered near the fireplace, his protests of innocence growing feebler. I swear, Mr. Holmes, he said, his voice cracking, I didn't know about the map or the crypt. The Crimson Hand, they've been pressuring me, yes, but I never meant for things to go this far. Holmes' gaze was unrelenting, his voice cold as the Surrey mist. Your intentions, Mr. Blackwood, are of little consequence when weighed against your actions. The letter, the attack in Whitechapel, the guarded crypt, all point to your complicity. But the stable hand's assault suggests another hand at play. We shall search the oak grove at dawn, but tonight we remain vigilant. As we prepared to retire, a sudden crash from the direction of the chapel shattered the uneasy silence. I seized my revolver, its familiar weight a reassurance, while Holmes grabbed the lantern, his movements swift and precise. Miss Vance, though pale, followed without hesitation, her courage a quiet force. Stay close, Holmes whispered, leading us through the manor's darkened corridors, the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing. Shadows dancing on paneled walls. Holmes leading, revolver gleaming in Watson's hand. The chapel door stood ajar, its hinges creaking as we entered. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. The stained glass saints watching in silent judgment. The spiral staircase to the crypt yawned open and a faint scuffling sound echoed from below. Holmes raised the lantern, revealing fresh footprints in the dust, boots, larger than those of the stable hand we had encountered earlier. Someone has been here, he murmured, and recently. We descended cautiously, the lantern casting long into a small chamber beneath the oak grove, where roots twisted through the ceiling like gnarled fingers. In the center stood a wooden chest, its lock broken, its lid ajar. Holmes knelt beside it, revealing a collection of gold coins, small jewels, and a ledger marked with Sir Reginald's seal, evidence of his opium profits, hidden from the taxman. Before we could examine further, a shadow moved at the tunnel's entrance. A tall figure, his face obscured by a scarf, lunged forward, a knife glinting in the lantern light. I fired a shot, the bullet grazing his shoulder, and he stumbled, dropping the knife. Holmes was upon him in an instant, wrestling him to the ground. The scarf fell away, revealing the scarred face of Silas Marwood, the forger we had confronted in London. Tunnel chamber, revolver flash, Holmes grappling with Marwood, coins glinting in the lantern light. "Marwood!" Holmes growled, pinning the man's arms. "You followed us from London. Who sent you? The Crimson Hand?" Marwood's eyes were wild, his breath ragged. "They'll kill me if I talk. Blackwood, he's in deeper than you know. The fortune's real, and they want it. I was to scare you off, or worse." Miss Vance, her voice trembling but firm, stepped forward. "You forged the letter, didn't you? On Harold's orders?" Marwood nodded, wincing as Holmes tightened his grip. "Aye, miss. Blackwood paid me. But the Crimson Hand, they're the ones pulling the strings. They know about the chest, been watching the manor for weeks. Varkas, their leader, he don't take kindly to interference." Holmes' expression was grim. "And the murder in Whitechapel? The man drained of blood. Was that their work, or yours?" "Not mine," Marwood protested. "The Crimson Hand. They did it to send a message. Make it look like a curse, keep folks away from the manor. They'll do worse if you don't back off." Holmes released him, but not before binding his wrists with a cord from his pocket, with Miss Vance guarding him. The fog thickened, but Holmes' uncanny sense of direction kept us on the road, the clatter of hooves echoing in the night. Hansom cab racing through fog, trees looming like phantoms, Holmes gripping the reins. Shouts pursued us and a gunshot rang out, the bullet splintering the cab's frame. I returned fire, aiming into the mist, while Miss Vance ducked low, her courage unshaken. "They're gaining!" I shouted, spotting shadowy figures on horseback emerging from the fog. Holmes' voice was calm, almost exhilarated. "Hold fast, Watson. We'll lose them at the village bridge." The bridge, a narrow stone arch over a stream, loomed ahead, its outline barely visible. Holmes maneuvered the cab with precision, the wheels skimming the edge as we crossed. Our pursuers, less adept, faltered, their horses rearing in the fog. We reached the village, where a small inn offered refuge. Holmes secured Marwood in a stable, under the innkeeper's wary eye, and we retreated to a private room to examine the chest. Village Inn, warm firelight, Holmes opening the chest, gold and jewels glinting, Marwood bound in the background. The ledger confirmed Sir Reginald's illicit trade. Opium profits funneled into gold and gems, hidden to evade scrutiny. The map's mark on the oak grove had led us to the chest, but Marwood's confession suggested the Crimson Hand knew of its existence. "They've been watching Harold," Holmes said, his pipe lit, its smoke curling upward. "The letter was their idea, executed through Marwood to scare you away, Miss Vance. Harold's debts made him their pawn." Miss Vance, her hands trembling as she examined a ruby ring from the chest, asked, "But why the murder?" "The newspaper clipping. It's too cruel to be mere theatrics." Holmes nodded. "The Crimson Hand thrives on fear. The murder was a warning, staged to mimic a ritual to bolster the curse narrative, but it also confirms their desperation. The fortune is substantial, and they'll kill to claim it." I checked my revolver, its chambers nearly spent. What syndicates reach? As we prepared for the return to London, I felt the weight of unseen eyes, watching, waiting, and plotting their next move. Chapter 9. Pieces of the Puzzle. The fog that had haunted our journey clung to us as we returned to 221B Baker Street, its tendrils weaving through the London streets like a spectral net. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of our recent ordeal. The midnight pursuit through the misty grounds of Blackwood Manor, the capture of Silas Marwood, and the discovery of Sir Reginald Blackwood's hidden chest of opium profits, pressing heavily upon me. The chest, now secured in our sitting room, gleamed faintly in the firelight, its gold coins and jewels a tangible link to the mystery of the blood-stained letter. Sherlock Holmes, ever the master of focus, sat in his armchair, pipe in hand, his sharp eyes darting between the chest, the ledger, and the map we had retrieved from the crypt. Miss Eleanor Vance, though weary from the night's dangers, sat resolute, her morning gown a somber contrast to the fire in her gaze. The events of the past days had woven a complex tapestry. Harold Blackwood's confession of his debts to the Crimson Hand Syndicate, Marwood's role as the forger of the terrifying letter, and the syndicate's violent attempts to thwart our investigation. The newspaper clipping about the ritualistic murder in Whitechapel, with its chilling note, lingered in my mind, a grim reminder of the stakes. Holmes, however, was undaunted, his mind a whirl of deduction as he pieced together the puzzle. 221B Baker Street, firelight flickering, chest open with gold and jewels, Holmes puffing his pipe, papers spread across the table. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low and deliberate, "we are nearing the heart of this affair. The chest confirms Sir Reginald's hidden fortune. Opium profits, concealed to evade taxes or creditors. Harold's debts to the Crimson Hand explain his desperation, but the syndicate's involvement suggests a larger game. The murder clipping was a red herring, designed to amplify the curse narrative. Leverage. We must return to Blackwood Manor and confront Harold with the evidence. The map points to the oak grove, but the chest was only part of the fortune. There may be more hidden, or the syndicate believes so." He spread the map on the table, its cryptic mark near the oak grove now explained by the chest's discovery. The ledger, written in Sir Reginald's meticulous hand, detailed shipments from Calcutta, with coded entries hinting at additional caches. "These numbers," Holmes said, tapping a column, "suggest multiple hiding places. The crypt was one, the grove another. But there's a pattern. Sir Reginald was methodical. We must search the manor again, with Marwood's testimony to pressure Harold." Mrs. Hudson entered with a tray of tea, her maternal concern evident. "You've not slept a wink, any of you," she said, setting the tray down. "And that chest, mark my words, it's trouble. Be careful, Mr. Holmes." "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said, his tone softening. "We shall take every precaution." As we sipped tea, I examined the handkerchief marked HB, its monogram stark against the linen. "This was no accident," I said. "Marwood admitted stealing it to shift blame. But why leave it in Whitechapel?" "A deliberate misdirection," Holmes replied. "The Crimson Hand thrives on confusion. The handkerchief implicates Harold, diverting suspicion from their true operatives. But it also confirms their presence in London. They're watching us, Watson." Miss Vance, her voice steady despite her fatigue, asked, "What of the murder?" The clipping said the victim was drained of blood, like some ritual. Was it truly the syndicate's work, or another deception? Holmes leaned back, his pipe smoke curling upward. The murder is a puzzle within a puzzle. The ritualistic elements, blood drained, body posed, suggest a theatrical flourish, consistent with the Crimson Hand's methods. But it may be unrelated, a coincidence exploited to heighten fear. We need more data. Tomorrow we return to Surrey. Marwood will accompany us, under guard, to confront Harold. Constant tremor. "You've brought him?" he gasped, spotting Marwood. "What is this, Mr. Holmes?" "The truth, Mr. Blackwood," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the fog. "Marwood has confessed to forging the letter on your orders, using paint to mimic blood. The Crimson Hand, to whom you owe a substantial debt, orchestrated this scheme to secure your uncle's fortune. This chest," he gestured to the box, carried by 2 constables we had summoned from the village, "is but part of it. Care to explain why you lied?" Harold's knees buckled, and he sank into a chair in the grand hall. "I had no choice, Eleanor," he said, his voice breaking. "The Crimson Hand, they threatened to ruin me, to kill me. They knew about Uncle's opium trade, heard rumors of his hidden wealth. They forced me to scare you away so I could find it for them." Miss Vance's eyes flashed with anger. "You betrayed me, Harold. Your own cousin. For money?" "Not just money," Harold said, his voice barely a whisper. "Survival. Varkas, their leader, he's ruthless. He ordered the letter, the attacks, the murder in Whitechapel. That was his warning to us all." Holmes' gaze was unrelenting. "And the stable hand in the crypt, another of Varkas' men?" Harold nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, they've been watching the manor, waiting for you to find the fortune. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry." Holmes turned to Marwood, who stood under the constable's guard. "And you, Marwood, anything to add?" The forger's eyes darted nervously. "Varkas knows you've got the chest. Hell come for it, Holmes. You're not safe, none of you." Holmes' lips curled in a faint smile. "Let him come. Watson, we'll search the oak grove again. There may be more caches. Miss Vance, stay with the constables. Harold, you'll remain under watch. Your cooperation may yet mitigate your punishment." We ventured to the oak grove, the fog swirling around the gnarled trees like a living thing. Holmes examined the ground. His one, while I wounded another. Holmes, with his uncanny agility, disarmed the third, pinning him to the floor. "Varkas," he demanded. "Where is he?" The man, bloodied but defiant, spat. "You'll never stop him, Holmes. The fortune's ours." Holmes bound him, his expression grim. "We shall see." Manor Hall, gunfire and chaos, Holmes tackling the intruder, fog swirling outside. The skirmish ended as quickly as it began, the remaining attackers fleeing into the fog. Holmes turned to Harold. "Your syndicate is crumbling, Mr. Blackwood. The chest and its contents will go to the authorities, and you'll testify against Varkas." As we secured the prisoners, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The fortune was real, the letter a ploy, and the Crimson Hand a deadly shadow. But Varkas, the syndicate's leader, remained at large, a final piece yet to be captured. Manor Hall, Holmes standing over the bound intruder, chest open with jewels, fog pressing against the windows, a distant shout fading. The night had brought us closer to the truth, but the shadow of Varkas loomed, a threat that would test Holmes' genius to its limits. Chapter 10. The Grand Deduction. The fog that had shadowed our investigation seemed to retreat as we gathered in the grand hall of Blackwood Manor, its high ceilings and faded tapestries bearing witness to the final act of our mystery. I, Dr. John Watson, stood by the fireplace, my revolver still warm from the skirmish with the Crimson Hands thugs. The chest of Sir Reginald Blackwood's hidden fortune, gold coins, jewels, and a ledger detailing his opium trade, sat on a table, its contents gleaming in the flickering candlelight. Sherlock Holmes, his lean frame taut with purpose, paced before the assembled group. Miss Eleanor Vance, her morning gown a stark contrast to her resolute expression. Harold Blackwood, his nervous twitch now a tremor of guilt. Silas Marwood, the scarred forger, bound and sullen under the watchful eyes of 2 village constables. And Grimes, the butler, whose shifty demeanor betrayed his complicity. The air was thick with anticipation. The truth is far more mundane and far more sinister. Holmes produced the letter, its frayed edges and crimson smears stark in the candle light. The stains, as I confirmed, were not blood but red ochre paint, mixed by Harold Blackwood and delivered by Grimes to a Holborn post office. The handwriting, while a remarkable imitation of Sir Reginald's, bore telltale signs of forgery, too precise, too uniform. Silas Marwood, a skilled forger, was hired to craft it. Marwood shifted uncomfortably, his scarred face twisting. "I told you, Holmes, I was paid to do it. I didn't know it'd cause such trouble." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Your role, Marwood, was pivotal, but you were a tool, not the mastermind. Harold Blackwood commissioned the letter, but his motives were dictated by desperation." He turned to Harold, who shrank under the scrutiny. "Mr. Blackwood, your debts to the Crimson Hands Syndicate drove you to this scheme. You believed the rumors of your uncle's hidden fortune, opium profits concealed from the taxman, and sought to claim it for yourself, to settle your debts and save your skin." Harold's voice was barely a whisper, his face ashen. "It's true, Mr. Holmes. I was drowning in debt, thousands owed to Varkas, their leader. They threatened my life. I thought if Eleanor sold her share of the estate, I could search for the fortune without interference. The letter was meant to scare her, nothing more." Miss Vance's eyes flashed with anger. "You betrayed me, Harold. Your own cousin, terrified by your lies." Holmes raised a hand, silencing the exchange. "Your betrayal, Mr. Blackwood, was but the surface of a deeper plot. The Crimson Hand, aware of the fortune through their network of informants, pressured you to act. The letter was their idea, executed through Marwood's skill. The attack in Whitechapel, where we found your handkerchief, was their attempt to deter us. The stable hand in the crypt, the pursuit through the fog, all were moves by the syndicate to protect their prize." He gestured to the chest. "This chest, found in the oak grove as marked on Sir Reginald, was meant to warn us off. But it has only sharpened our resolve." Holmes pinning clues to a board, letter, map, ledger, clipping. Close-ups of the crimson stains, the ruby pendant, the handkerchief. Holmes turned to Grimes, whose shifty eyes darted to the floor. "You, Mr. Grimes, played a smaller but crucial role. Your loyalty to Harold led you to deliver the letter, believing it a jest. But your ink-stained cuffs betrayed your involvement, and your fear of the syndicate's wrath kept you silent." Grimes nodded miserably. "I didn't know it had come to this, sir. Master Harold said it was harmless, a way to settle things. I never meant to hurt Miss Eleanor." Holmes' gaze softened, but only slightly. Your intentions, like heralds, are secondary to your actions. The law will decide your fate. He turned to Marwood. And you, Marwood, will testify against the Crimson Hand. Your cooperation may yet spare you a long sentence. Marwood's shoulders slumped, his defiance gone. He'll talk, Holmes. Varkas, he's got eyes everywhere. You'll need more than constables to stop him. Holmes' lips curled in a faint smile. We shall see. The Crimson Hand's reach is long, but not infinite. With the chest secured and Harold's confession, we have the leverage to dismantle their operation. Miss Vance, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, asked, What of the fortune? It's my uncle's legacy, tainted though it is. What happens to it now? Holmes paused, his eyes meeting hers. The fortune, as Sir Reginald's note warned, carries a curse, not of the supernatural, but of greed. It will be turned over to the authorities to be divided according to the law. As co-heir, you are entitled to your share, Miss Vance, but I advise caution. Wealth born of opium profits brings no peace. She nodded, clutching the ruby pendant from the chest. I want no part of it if it's tainted. Let it be used for good. Charity, perhaps, to atone for my uncle's sins. Holmes inclined his head, a rare gesture of approval. A wise choice. Watson, ensure the chest is locked and guarded until Scotland Yard. Harold sought salvation in wealth, but found only ruin. I nodded, my medical bag at my side, the revolver now holstered. And Varkas? He's still out there, Holmes. The Crimson Hand won't let this go. Holmes' eyes gleamed with the thrill of a new challenge. Let them come. We have struck a blow to their operation, and with Marwood's testimony, we shall hunt Varkas down. For now, the case of the blood-stained letter is closed. We returned to the sitting room, where the chest sat under lock and key, its contents a silent testament to Sir Reginald's legacy. Miss Vance, though weary, offered a faint smile. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. You've given me peace, however hard-won. Holmes bowed slightly. It is our duty, Miss Vance. Now, rest. The fog may linger, but the truth has pierced it. As we prepared to depart for London, the manor seemed lighter, its oppressive air dispelled by the resolution of the mystery. The fog outside began to lift, revealing the first rays of sunlight on the Surrey hills. I felt a surge of pride in my friend's genius, his ability to unravel the most tangled webs. Yet the shadow of Varkas and the Crimson Hand lingered, a reminder that our work was never truly done. Lackwood Manor at dawn, fog lifting. Holmes and Watson in a hansom cab, Miss Vance waving farewell, sunlight breaking through. The grand deduction had laid bare the truth, but the moral lesson was clear. Greed, as Holmes had said, was a curse that plagued mankind more than any phantom. As we rattled back to Baker Street, I knew this case would linger in my chronicles. A tale of shadows, secrets, and the relentless pursuit of justice.